The cold wind brushed against the glass walls of the towering skyscraper as Alexander Trent stood by his office window, his reflection merging with the city lights below. He was the kind of man newspapers wrote about, a self-made millionaire, the youngest CEO in one of Africa's largest real estate empires. His suits were tailored in Milan. His watch gleamed with understated luxury, and his name commanded respect wherever it was spoken. But beneath the armor of success, there was a ghost that haunted him. The memory of a girl with kind eyes and a laughter that made poverty feel like paradise. Her name was Amara. Years ago, they had grown up together in a forgotten village, running barefoot through dust and dreams. They had shared bread when hunger was a daily visitor, whispered their hopes under moonlit skies, and promised to find each other again once life became kinder. But life, cruel as it often is, took them down separate roads. Alexander left to chase opportunity. Amara stayed behind, swallowed by the hardships of survival. It had been 15 years since he last saw her. Now, as his black Rolls-Royce rolled through the busy market streets that morning, his mind was far from nostalgia until fate decided to intervene. The car slowed at a red light near an old, crumbling church, and that's when he saw her, a woman, thin and frail, sat on the pavement with a small baby wrapped in torn fabric against her chest. Her eyes were tired, but they still held a spark he could never forget. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. The years, the success, the skyscrapers, they all vanished in that single instant. "Sir, should I drive on?" his chauffeur asked. Alexander didn't answer. He opened the car door and stepped into the noise of the street. His polished shoes hit the dusty ground, drawing stares from onlookers. The woman looked up, startled, as if afraid he might chase her away. "Amara?" he whispered, his voice breaking on her name. She froze. Her lips trembled as she looked at him, disbelief and shame warring in her eyes. "Alex," she breathed, almost too softly to be heard. He knelt in front of her, ignoring the murmurs around them. "What happened to you?" he asked, glancing at the baby sleeping against her shoulder. Her hands tightened around the child. "Life happened," she said with a weak smile. "I lost everything, Alex. My parents died. The man I married left us. I tried to survive, but—" Her voice cracked. "This little one hasn't eaten properly in 2 days." Something inside Alexander shattered. He looked at her, at the dirt-streaked face that once glowed with dreams, at the fragile hope still clinging to her spirit, and he felt a rush of guilt so fierce it stole his breath. He took off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders, ignoring her protests. "You're coming with me," he said firmly. "No, Alex, please," she whispered. "People are watching. I can't." "I don't care," he interrupted, his tone sharper now, commanding. "I lost you once. I won't lose you again." Before she could reply, he lifted the baby gently from her arms, holding it as though it were made of glass. The crowd parted silently as he guided Amara toward the car. Cameras flashed. Some whispered his name in disbelief. The city's most powerful man, carrying a beggar woman and her child. Back at his penthouse, Amara stood at the doorway, trembling. Everything around her screamed of wealth. Marble floors, golden chandeliers, and walls of glass opening to a skyline of endless light. She looked completely out of place, her bare feet leaving faint marks on the polished tiles. "You're safe here," Alexander said softly. "You and the baby." She turned to him, tears glistening in her eyes. "Why are you doing this, Alex? You don't owe me anything." He looked at her with sadness that ran deep. "Maybe I do," he murmured. "You believed in me when I had nothing. You gave me courage when the world didn't. Everything I am, it started with you." That night, he arranged for the baby to be seen by the best pediatrician in the city, had a warm meal brought in, and prepared a room for Amara. She tried to refuse, but exhaustion won. When she finally fell asleep, clutching her child, Alexander stood silently by the doorway, the image of a man who had everything yet realized how empty his life had truly been. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the blinds. Amara woke to find a new dress laid out beside her bed. Simple, elegant, and soft to the touch. She hesitated before wearing it, then stepped into the vast dining room where Alexander was already waiting. For a while they ate in silence. Then she looked up and said, I still can't believe it's really you." He smiled faintly. "And I can't believe how much I let life take from me before finding you again." But just as peace began to return to her eyes, the sound of a doorbell broke the moment. A woman's voice echoed from the hall, sharp, polished, and full of authority. "Alexander, I told you I'd come early for the meeting." Amara froze. The woman who entered was stunning, tall, confident, dressed in a tailored suit. She stopped abruptly when she saw Amara and the baby. Her gaze flicked between them, her expression tightening. "Who is she?" the woman asked coldly. Alexander stood, his jaw tightening. "This is Amara," he said. "She's someone very important to me." The woman's eyes narrowed. "Important? Alex, the board is already questioning your recent decisions. Now you're bringing street people into your home." Amara's hands shook as she rose, ready to leave, but Alexander stopped her with a look that silenced the room. "I don't care what the board thinks," he said slowly, each word heavy with conviction. "For years, I've built a fortune on foundations of steel and glass. But none of it means anything if I forget where I came from or who I left behind." The woman stared at him, speechless. Amar's eyes filled again, not with shame this time, but something softer. "Hope." Alexander turned toward her, stepping closer, his voice low and certain. "You don't belong on the streets. Amara, you belong here with me." But before she could answer, the baby started to cry, and something about the sound made Alexander pause. He looked down at the tiny face, and a strange familiarity flickered in his expression. He turned slowly back to Amara. "Amara," he whispered, his pulse quickening. "This child, who is his father?" Her silence stretched like a storm about to break, and in that moment, everything around them seemed to freeze. The air, the light, even time itself, as she looked at him with trembling lips and eyes full of secrets she'd buried for years. Then, in a whisper that changed everything, she said, "Alex." Amara's voice trembled as she clutched the edge of the dining table, her knuckles pale. The air around them thickened, heavy with memories that refused to stay buried. The baby's cries filled the silence, soft but piercing, like echoes of truth clawing their way out of the past. Alexander's heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his throat. He took a slow step closer, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Amara, tell me, who is the father?" Tears welled in her eyes. Her lips parted, but no words came at first. Then she looked at him, really looked at him, as if seeing not the man in the expensive suit before her, but the boy who once swore he'd come back for her. "You already know," she said finally, her voice cracking under the weight of it. The world tilted, his breath caught. "What?" She looked down at the baby, the same baby who had his dark curls, his sharp nose, the faint dimple that appeared only when smiling. "His name is Liam," she whispered, brushing a tear off the child's cheek. He's your son, Alex." The words hit him like thunder. For a moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the city outside, the distant rush of traffic below. Then, slowly, Alexander reached out, his trembling hand hovering over the baby's tiny fingers before daring to touch them. The warmth was real, the connection undeniable. "My son," he murmured, disbelief now colliding in his voice. "All these years." Amara turned away, her shoulders shaking. "I tried to tell you," she said. "I wrote letters when I found out I was pregnant. I sent them to your uncle's address, but they were never answered. Then I heard you'd gone abroad. You became someone I couldn't reach anymore. I didn't want to destroy your future, Alex, so I raised him alone." Alexander swallowed hard, memories flooding his mind. His early days in the city, struggling to make a name, the endless nights he'd buried himself in work, never once looking back because he thought love had betrayed him. But now, standing before her, he realized love had never left. It had just been waiting for him to come home. The other woman, Clarissa, his business partner and rumored fiancée, broke the silence with a scoff. "This is insane," she snapped. "You can't just believe her, Alex. She's probably using you. Look at her. A street beggar? You think this is your child." Her voice dripped venom, but Alexander didn't even look her way. His eyes were fixed on Amara. "I don't need proof," he said quietly. "I can see it." Clarissa's face flushed with anger. "You're throwing away everything you've built for this?" He turned toward her, calm but cold. "Everything I built means nothing if I can't be the man I promised her I'd be." Amara closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. The baby cooed softly, unaware that his very existence had just unraveled years of silence and pain. Clarissa stood frozen for a moment, then grabbed her handbag with a sharp motion. "You'll regret this, Alex," she hissed. "Don't think the board will stand by you when they find out about this scandal." He didn't answer. He only watched as she stormed out, the slam of the door echoing to the penthouse like a closing chapter. When the silence returned, it was thick with emotion. Amara wiped her tears and turned toward the window. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered. "She's important to your company, isn't she?" "I can rebuild a company," he said softly, stepping closer. "But I can't rebuild a soul once it's lost. And you," he reached out, gently turning her toward him, "you're the only part of mine I ever miss." Her breath hitched as their eyes met. Years of longing, heartbreak, and unspoken love collided in that single glance. For a long time, neither spoke. Then, slowly, Alexander picked up the baby again. The child smiled, small, innocent, pure, and in that smile, Alexander saw redemption. Over the next few days, he arranged everything. A doctor came every morning for the baby, a nutritionist for Amara, clothes, food, comfort, all provided. But it wasn't the luxury that touched her, it was the way he cared. The way he'd stay up at night, rocking Liam when he cried, his once polished hands now learning the language of fatherhood. Sometimes, Amara would watch him quietly from the doorway, her heart torn between gratitude and fear. The past had taught her not to trust happiness. It always demanded payment later. One evening, as the city glowed under a blanket of stars, Alexander found her standing on the balcony. The wind lifted her hair, and for a moment, she looked like the girl from the village again. "Do you ever think about the past?" he asked, his voice gentle. She nodded, not turning around. "Every day, especially the day you left. I remember watching the bus drive away, thinking I'd lost everything. I didn't know then that losing you was just the beginning." He stepped beside her, leaning against the railing. "If I could go back, I'd never get on that bus. I'd rather be poor with you than rich without you." She smiled faintly, shaking her head. "You say that now. But life isn't that simple, Alex. You belong to a different world now, one of money, power, and people who wouldn't understand what we've been through." He looked at her, his voice low but certain. "Then I'll leave that world behind." She turned sharply, eyes wide. "You can't mean that." "I do," he said. "All my life, I've chased success thinking it would fill the emptiness inside me. But standing here with you, I finally understand what I've been missing. It wasn't power. It wasn't wealth. It was love, yours." Amara's lips parted, but words failed her. A tear slipped down her cheek, and Alexander reached out, brushing it away with his thumb. His touch lingered, gentle, trembling, like the first drop of rain after years of drought. Before she could reply, the baby stirred inside, his soft cries pulling her away. She hurried back to soothe him, but Alexander followed quietly, watching as she rocked the child in her arms, humming an old lullaby from their childhood, the same tune they used to sing under the stars. "Do you remember that song?" he asked softly. She nodded. "You used to say it would make our dreams come true." "And maybe it still will," he murmured. She looked at him then, her heart torn between trust and doubt. "You don't know what it's like, Alex, to be invisible, to be treated like nothing. You can't just erase years of pain with promises." He knelt beside her, his eyes steady. "Then let me prove it, not with words, with time." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then, for the first time in years, Amara smiled, a fragile, uncertain smile, but real, the kind that carried the scent of hope. Outside, thunder rumbled softly in the distance. Rain began to fall against the glass walls, a rhythmic whisper that seemed to bless their silence. The lights of the city blurred into gold and silver streaks, and in that quiet space, Alexander felt something he hadn't felt in a lifetime. Peace. But far below, in the dark corners of the city, not everyone was at peace. Clarissa stood by her car, phone pressed to her ear, her voice icy. Yes, it's true. He's with her. Find out everything about that woman. Where she's from, what she's hiding, and who that child really is. If she thinks she can ruin Alexander Trent. She has no idea who she's dealing with. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating her face. Beautiful, furious, and dangerous. And far above, in the penthouse glowing softly against the storm, Amara held her baby close, while Alexander watched her from the shadows, unaware that the world he thought he could leave behind was already moving against him. The storm outside roared louder that night, as if the heavens themselves were watching, waiting. Alexander stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, staring into the thunderlit sky, feeling the pulse of uncertainty beating against his chest. Behind him, the soft hum of Amara's lullaby drifted through the air, calming the cries of their child. It was a fragile moment of peace, but beneath it, shadows stirred. In the following days, whispers began to spread across the city. Newspapers printed blurred photos of Alexander carrying Amara from the street. Social media buzzed with questions. The headlines ruthless. Asterisk, millionaire CEO caught in scandal. Secret woman and baby in his mansion. Asterisk, Alexander ignored it all. For the first time in his life, he didn't care what the world thought. He had spent years building an empire that brought him everything except meaning. Now, meaning slept in the next room, wrapped in Amara's arms. But Clarissa wasn't done. Her voice echoed through boardrooms, her influence turning allies into doubters. He's lost control, she said. He's jeopardizing our reputation. The company needs leadership that isn't blinded by emotion. Within a week, an emergency board meeting was called. The same people who once praised him now questioned his judgment. Alexander sat at the long mahogany table, calm but fierce, as they dissected his choices. Mr. Trent, one of them said coldly, you've always been a man of vision, but recently your actions have raised concerns. The woman living in your residence, she's not your wife, and the press is destroying our image. The investors want answers. He looked up, meeting every pair of eyes with quiet strength. You want answers? Here's the truth. That woman you call the beggar once gave me food when I was starving. She believed in me when I was nothing. Every brick in this company stands on the strength she gave me. If that's something to be ashamed of, then perhaps I no longer belong here. A stunned silence followed. Clarissa smirked faintly, thinking she'd won. So you're resigning? Alexander's eyes hardened. No, he said evenly. I'm reclaiming what this company was meant to stand for. Integrity, compassion, humanity. If that makes you uncomfortable, then maybe it's you who should reconsider your place here. The tension snapped like glass. Some of the board members shifted uncomfortably. Others looked away, ashamed. Clarissa's confident smile faltered when the meeting ended. Alexander walked out into the pouring rain, his heart lighter despite the storm around him. The choice was made, and for the first time, it felt right. Back at the penthouse, Amara sat by the fire, rocking Liam. She looked up when he entered, drenched and silent. For a moment, fear flickered in her eyes. What happened? He dropped to one knee before her, taking her free hand in his. I told him the truth, he said simply, and I don't care what comes next. I'm done hiding who you are, who we are. Her eyes filled with tears. You don't have to sacrifice everything for me, Alex. He smiled, soft, tired, but unbreakable. You are everything, Amara. I'd build a kingdom, but you're the only thing that makes it worth ruling. She pressed a trembling hand to his face. For years, she had prayed for miracles, but she never imagined the boy she once loved would return like this, powerful yet tender, ready to defy the world for her. They stayed like that for a long time, two souls who had wandered through loss and time, finally finding their way back home. But destiny wasn't finished weaving its threads. The next morning, a black car pulled up outside Alexander's residence. A man in a dark coat stepped out, holding an envelope. He introduced himself as a private investigator. I was hired by Miss Clarissa Evans, he said, handing Alexander the file. But I think you should see this first. Inside were photographs, documents that revealed the full extent of Clarissa's schemes. She had been laundering company funds through offshore accounts, using Alexander's name to hide it. The board had no idea. Alexander's jaw tightened as he flipped through the evidence. "Why are you giving this to me?" The investigator hesitated. "Because she crossed the line. She wanted to ruin an innocent woman and a child. I don't work for monsters." Within hours, Alexander gathered the board again. The evidence was presented, the truth laid bare. Clarissa's face went pale as her empire of lies collapsed in front of her. "You can't prove anything," she hissed. Alexander placed the final document on the table, her signed authorization for the transfer. "I just did," he said quietly. "You try to destroy the woman I love and the company I built. You'll face the law now." Security escorted her out. The silence that followed was deafening, but for the first time in weeks, it was a silence of respect and redemption. When he returned home that night, Amara was waiting by the window, holding Liam. She turned as he entered, her expression soft but questioning. "It's over," he said. "Clarissa's gone. Everything's clean now." She smiled, a quiet, trembling smile of relief. "I knew you'd find a way." He walked to her, his eyes tender. "I didn't find a way. You were the way." He reached for Liam, holding the child high, his voice barely steady. "From this day, I'll never let anything separate us again. I don't care about money or status. All I want is a life with you, simple, honest, and real." Tears streamed down Amara's face as she whispered, "You've already given me more than I ever dreamed, Alex." But the story of their rebirth wasn't finished. Weeks turned into months. The scandal faded, replaced by something far greater: admiration. The same newspapers that once mocked Alexander now praised him for his humility, calling him Asterisk, the millionaire with a heart. Asterisk. He rebuilt his company not as a symbol of power, but as a bridge of hope. He opened a foundation for struggling single mothers, naming it the Amara Trust. It became a sanctuary for women who had lost everything, a place where no one was invisible anymore. Amara often visited the center, helping others the way she once wished someone had helped her. Each time she saw a woman smile again, she felt a piece of her old pain dissolve. One afternoon, Alexander stood behind her, watching her guide a group of young mothers. He was dressed casually, no suits, no pretense, just a man proud of the woman who had reminded him of what truly mattered. "You've changed lives," he said quietly. She turned, smiling up at him. "No, we have." He looked down at her, eyes glowing with love. "I used to think success was about how high I could climb. Now I know it's about who I can lift along the way." Liam ran between them then, laughing, his small hands clutching both of theirs. The world had once stolen everything from them, but now it seemed to be giving it all back in quiet, beautiful pieces. Later that night, as the sun sank into the horizon, Alexander and Amara returned to their balcony, the same place where he had once promised to prove his love. The city lights shimmered like fallen stars below. "Do you ever think about the village?" he asked softly. "Every day," she said. "It's where everything began." He smiled. "Then maybe it's time we went back." She looked up, startled. "Back?" He nodded. "I bought the land, the whole area. I'm building schools, homes, and I want to name the new community after your parents." Her breath caught. "Alex, why?" "Because they raised the woman who saved me." She covered her mouth, tears falling freely now. "You never stopped giving." He pulled her close, his voice a whisper in her hair. "I'm just returning what I owe." The night deepened around them, warm and alive. Below, the city pulsed with dreams. Above, the stars gleamed brighter than ever, as if the universe itself approved of the love it had once separated only to reunite when the time was right. As they stood together, the once beggar woman and the once lost millionaire, there was no need for words. Their story was no longer about wealth or tragedy. It was about grace, the kind that survives storms, outlasts time, and forgives everything. And somewhere between the echoes of thunder and the heartbeat of a sleeping child, destiny finally smiled. Not because it had written a perfect story, but because two broken hearts had learned how to make it whole again.